Captain Rodriguez unbuckled from her command chair and floated toward the main view screen. The stars looked different here, wherever here was. Their experimental jump had worked, perhaps too well. "Damage report," she ordered, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Lieutenant Seto's fingers danced across his engineering console. "Drive is operational but showing unusual energy fluctuations. Hull integrity at 97%. Minor damage to the port sensor array during the jump." "Those vessels are accelerating toward us," Officer Park announced, his eyes never leaving the navigation display. "Configuration unknown. Not matching any Earth or colony designs." Dr. Liang, the xenolinguist and cultural specialist, looked up from her station with wide eyes. "Elena, we might have just made first contact." Security Officer Chen's hand hovered near the weapon systems, "or we might have jumped right into someone's territorial waters." "Let's not assume hostility," Rodriguez said, though she didn't order Chen to stand down. 6 months of training for this mission had taught her to balance optimism with caution. "Dr. Liang, prepare first contact protocols." Officer Chen, "Defensive systems only. No weapons charging unless I give the order." The approaching vessels grew larger on the view screen, crystalline structures that seemed to bend light around them, propelled by engines that left no visible exhaust. "They're beautiful," whispered Medical Officer Patel, who had remained silent until now. "And at least a century ahead of our technology," Sato added, analyzing the sensor data. "Maybe more." Rodriguez straightened her uniform. "Open all frequencies, standard greeting package." Dr. Liang activated the communication system they had prepared for this exact scenario. Mathematical sequences, simple pictograms, and basic language samples in all major Earth languages. The message concluded with an image of the solar system and the Intrepid's journey path, showing they had come from Earth with peaceful intentions. Aboard the Lid Confederation vessel, Commander Zixlar studied the incoming transmission with growing concern. "The patterns are erratic and contain multiple encoding systems," reported Communications Officer Trisnar. "Possible attempt to overwhelm our security protocols." "Analysis of their vessel," Zixlar demanded. "Primitive materials by our standards, Commander, but their energy signature is unusual. The radiation pattern doesn't match any known propulsion system in our database." Zixlar's 4 eyes narrowed as he considered the situation. In his 3 centuries of service to the Confederation, he had overseen 17 first contacts. Standard procedure was clear: establish communication, determine intent, and escort the new species to a diplomatic station. But something about this vessel troubled him. The Confederation's long-range monitoring had detected unusual activity in this sector of space. Energy fluctuations, ripples in subspace, signals that defied standard analysis. Some members of the Council suspected a new species might be preparing for expansion. "Attempt communication using basic mathematical response," he ordered, "but maintain distance and prepare containment fields." Back on the Intrepid, the crew waited tensely for a response. When it came, the ship's computer struggled to interpret the alien mathematics. "It's similar to our approach," Dr. Liang said, excitement in her voice, "but they're using base 16 notation instead of our base 10. "Can you respond?" Rodriguez asked. "I think." A sudden jolt threw everyone against their restraints as the ship's warning systems activated. "Energy field attempting to lock onto us," Sato shouted. "It's interfering with our drive." The experimental FTL drive, still active and unstable from their jump, reacted to the alien energy field. Protective systems engaged automatically, the ship's computer interpreting the unknown energy as a threat. "We're sending out electromagnetic pulses," Chen reported as the Intrepid shuddered. "Defensive countermeasures online." "Override," Rodriguez commanded, but it was too late. The Intrepid's automated defense systems had already deployed a series of measures designed to break targeting locks, exactly the wrong response to what might have been a standard first contact procedure. Commander Zixlar watched as the human vessel seemingly responded to their greeting with what appeared to be electronic countermeasures. His mandibles clicked once in decision. "Alert all Confederation vessels," he ordered. "Hostile human ship detected. Initiate quarantine protocols immediately." The Intrepid lurched as another energy beam swept across its hull, this one stronger than the last. Warning lights bathed the bridge in crimson. "They're escalating," Chen said, his voice tight. "That last one nearly penetrated our shields." Captain Rodriguez gripped her command chair. "Dr. Liang, any progress on communication?" The xenolinguist shook her head in frustration. "Our translation matrix keeps generating nonsensical outputs. It's like our messages are being scrambled before they reach them." Engineer Sato looked up from his console, realization dawning on his face. "It's the drive interference. Our experimental FTL system is still producing temporal distortion fields. Every transmission we send is being chronologically fragmented." "In English, please," Chen snapped, as he diverted power to the shield grid. "Our messages are being received out of order," Sato explained. "We say hello, they might hear it after we say, 'We come in peace,' making it sound like a threat or nonsense." Rodriguez made a swift decision. "Shut down the drive completely." "Maybe then we can." The ship jolted violently as a more powerful beam struck them. "No time," Park called out from navigation. 3 more vessels approaching from Sector 4. "They're moving to surround us." On the Confederation flagship, Tactical Officer Krendel observed the human vessel's erratic movements with growing unease. "Their evasive pattern is unlike anything in our tactical database," he reported to Commander Zixlar. "They're anticipating our targeting vectors with unprecedented accuracy." In truth, the Intrepid's movements weren't planned at all. The experimental drive's fluctuations were causing micro-jumps in space-time, inadvertently moving the ship milliseconds before each targeting beam could lock on, an effect the human crew wasn't even aware of. Zixlar's secondary eyes narrowed. "Deploy the resonance net. All vessels, converging pattern Epsilon." The 3 Confederation warships began a complex maneuver, their crystalline hulls glinting as they positioned themselves in a triangular formation around the human vessel. Inside the Intrepid, Medical Officer Patul worked frantically to treat a burn on Officer Chen's arm, sustained when his console overloaded. "We need to show them we're not a threat," Rodriguez insisted, watching the alien vessels coordinate their movements with disturbing precision. Dr. Liang typed furiously at her station. "I'm bypassing our standard translation matrix. Direct transmission, basic mathematical principles followed by simple pictograms showing peaceful intent." "They're preparing something," Park warned, gesturing to the view screen. The 3 alien ships had begun emitting a strange, web-like energy pattern between them. "Last chance," Rodriguez said. "Broadcast on all frequencies, emergency power." The Intrepid's communication array flared to life, channeling every available joule of power into Dr. Liang's carefully crafted message. The transmission burst outward just as the Confederation vessels activated their resonance net, a containment field designed to immobilize enemy ships. The 2 energy patterns collided in space, creating an unexpected reaction. The Intrepid's high-powered transmission, combined with residual temporal distortion from the experimental drive, caused a feedback loop in the resonance net. A blinding flash enveloped all 4 ships. Aboard the Confederation flagship, alarms wailed as systems temporarily failed. Commander Zixlar blinked his primary eyes, clearing the spots from his vision. "Status report," he demanded. "The resonance net has failed," Krendel responded, mandibles clicking in agitation. "The human vessel used some kind of energy weapon to disrupt it. 2 of our ships reporting moderate damage to sensor arrays." Zixlar stared at the view screen where the human ship was already moving away at high speed, using the confusion to break free from their encirclement. "Unprecedented," he murmured. Then, with greater resolve, "All vessels, pursue and contain. Priority alert to Confederation Command. Hostile human vessel demonstrates advanced defensive capabilities. Request immediate dispatch of the pursuit fleet. Meanwhile, aboard the Intrepid, the crew picked themselves up from the deck where the energy flash had thrown them. What just happened? Patil asked, helping Dr. Liang back to her station. Engineer Seto stared at his readings in disbelief. Our transmission. It somehow interacted with their energy field. They might think we deliberately attacked them. Captain Rodriguez looked at the fleeing alien ships on the view screen, her expression grim. Then we've just made the worst first impression in human history. The emergency shutdown of the experimental drive plunged the Intrepid into relative darkness, emergency lighting casting long shadows across the bridge. Captain Rodriguez moved between stations, checking on her crew as they worked to restore essential systems. How bad is it? She asked, stopping beside Engineer Sato. He wiped sweat from his brow, the gesture leaving a streak of mechanical fluid across his forehead. Main power at 28%. Life support stable but running on auxiliary systems. The drive is offline but still generating residual temporal distortions. Those distortions might save our lives, Officer Chen said from his security station. Long-range sensors show they're having trouble tracking us consistently. Dr. Liang looked up from where she and Officer Patel had been analyzing the intercepted alien communications. Belena, I think I understand why they reacted so aggressively. Look at this. She pulled up a visualization of their communication attempts alongside the alien responses. The timing was completely misaligned. Their peaceful messages arriving in fragments that, when reordered by the aliens' translation systems, created entirely different meanings. Our greeting protocol about peaceful scientific exploration, Dr. Liang explained, pointing to specific data points, when fragmented by the temporal distortion, contains phrases that could be interpreted as "prepare for demonstration of power" and "your defenses will be tested." Rodriguez cursed under her breath. So every attempt to explain ourselves makes things worse. Not just that, Patil added, her medical training giving her insight into biological responses. Based on the visual data we've collected, their species appears to communicate not just with sound, but with subtle body movements, mandible clicks, eye positions. Our static images would seem unnatural, possibly threatening. Navigation Officer Park interrupted from his station. Captain, I've analyzed their pursuit pattern. They're not just following us. They're herding us away from the direction of Earth. A heavy silence fell over the bridge as the implication became clear. They're protecting their territory from what they think is an advanced scout, Rodriguez said quietly. They believe we're the first wave of an invasion. In the Confederation Council chamber, the emergency session had turned contentious. Intelligence Director Mevnar stood at the center of the chamber, multiple appendages gesturing at the holographic displays surrounding her. The evidence is conclusive, she insisted. The human vessel demonstrates technologies we believed were centuries beyond their development stage. Their response to our containment efforts shows tactical sophistication that suggests military training. She switched the display to show intercepted Earth broadcasts, action movies showing alien invasions, historical documentaries about warfare, competitive sports where humans tackled each other. Without cultural context, the violent imagery painted a concerning picture. Council member Lothran, eldest of the Synthi delegation, raised a gnarled limb for attention. Have we considered that our initial approach might have appeared threatening to a species encountering interstellar travelers for the first time? Mevnar clicked her mandibles dismissively. Their vessel entered our territory unannounced, ignored standard greeting protocols, and deployed energy weapons against our containment vessels. Their intentions are clear. Admiral Xorlak stepped forward, his ceremonial armor gleaming under the council chamber lights. The pursuit fleet is already underway. We will capture this vessel and determine the full extent of the human threat before they can return to their homeworld. And if they resist? Asked Lothran. The Admiral's primary eyes narrowed. Then we will have confirmation of their hostile intent. The safety of the Confederation takes precedence over diplomatic niceties. Back aboard the Intrepid, Captain Rodriguez had reached a difficult decision. She addressed her exhausted crew, her voice firm despite her fatigue. We can't outrun them forever, and we can't communicate effectively with the drive causing interference. We need a place to hide, make repairs, and figure out how to clear up this misunderstanding before it escalates further. She nodded to Navigation Officer Park, who brought up a scan of the nearby system. There, Rodriguez said, pointing to a dense asteroid field orbiting a gas giant. We'll lose them there and buy ourselves some time. Time for what? Asked Officer Chen. Captain Rodriguez's expression was determined. Time to find a way to convince them we're not the enemy before they bring in reinforcements, or worse, find Earth. The Intrepid slipped between two massive asteroids, its hull scraping against the smaller debris that surrounded them. The ship's thrusters fired in controlled bursts, adjusting their trajectory with precision despite the damage to the navigation systems. Proximity alert, Park called out, his fingers dancing across the navigation console. 2 pursuit craft at Sector 7, closing fast. Captain Rodriguez studied the tactical display. The asteroid field stretched before them like a 3-dimensional maze, equal parts danger and opportunity. Status of the stealth protocols. Chen looked up from his security station. Emissions dampeners at maximum. Heat signature masked. But they're using some kind of resonance scanning we can't counter. They keep picking up our trail. From the engineering station, Seto spoke without looking up from his work. I think I know why. The drive is offline, but it's still generating a unique quantum signature. That's what they're tracking. Can we mask it? Rodriguez asked. Sato shook his head. Not completely. But his eyes lit up with sudden inspiration. We could use it to our advantage. Dr. Liang looked at him curiously. How? The temporal distortions create echo signatures, Sato explained, moving to the main console to demonstrate. If I can modify our sensor array to amplify these echoes in specific directions, we could create false trails. Chen finished, understanding immediately. Rodriguez nodded. Do it. Officer Park, find us the densest part of this field. We need somewhere to hide while Sato works. Outside, the Confederation pursuit ships moved with uncanny coordination, their crystalline hulls reflecting the distant starlight as they navigated the treacherous asteroid field. Unlike the human vessel, their advanced technology allowed them to slip between the rocks with minimal course corrections, steadily gaining ground. Inside the lead pursuit ship, Pursuit Commander Velthak monitored the tracking display with growing frustration. The human vessel's movements are erratic. They risk collision with multiple asteroids on their current trajectory. His second-in-command, Pilot Zemfir, flicked her secondary eyes in a gesture of confusion. Could their navigation systems be failing? More likely a deliberate strategy to throw us off. Velthak responded, mandibles clicking in determination. Their species thrives on unpredictability, according to intelligence reports. The truth was far more prosaic. The Intrepid's damaged navigation systems were indeed struggling, forcing Officer Park to rely on visual sighting and instinct as much as computer assistance. What appeared to the Confederation as brilliant tactical maneuvering was actually a damaged ship pushed to its limits by a skilled but desperate crew. The Intrepid rounded a massive, slowly spinning asteroid and Park spotted what they needed, a hollowed-out rock, likely the result of an ancient collision, creating a natural hangar large enough to conceal their ship. There, he called out, already adjusting their course. As they approached the opening, Seto finished his modifications to the sensor array. Ready to deploy the echo signatures, Captain. Once activated, they'll create 3 false trails leading in different directions. Rodriguez nodded. Activate on my mark. Officer Park, take us in. Officer Chen, prepare mining charges. Mining charges? Patel asked from her medical station, where she'd been inventorying their dwindling supplies. We're going to seal ourselves in, Rodriguez explained. The charges will collapse the entrance just enough to hide us without trapping us completely. As the Intrepid slipped into the asteroid's shadow, Rodriguez gave the order. Now, 3 distinct energy signatures burst from the ship, shooting off in different directions through the asteroid field. Moments later, the Intrepid glided into the natural cavity within the massive rock. Once inside, Chen deployed the mining charges they had brought for scientific sampling. The controlled explosion sent just enough debris cascading across the entrance to obscure it from casual detection. Outside, the Confederation pursuit fleet splintered, ships racing off to follow each of the false signatures. Commander Velthak hesitated, studying his tactical display with suspicion. "They're attempting to confuse our sensors," he concluded. "Divide into 3 pursuit groups. Group 1, follow me on the strongest signature. The others pursue the remaining trails." Inside their rocky hiding place, the Intrepid powered down to minimal life support, the bridge illuminated only by emergency lighting and the glow of essential consoles. How long until they realized they're chasing ghosts? Chen asked quietly. Captain Rodriguez checked the chronometer. "Maybe hours, maybe minutes. Whatever time we have, we need to use it wisely." She turned to her crew. "Dr. Lang, Engineer Sato, I need a communication solution that works despite the temporal distortion. The rest of you, begin converting our scientific equipment. We're going to build something they can't misinterpret." The interior of the Intrepid had transformed over 36 hours. What was once a neatly organized exploration vessel now resembled a chaotic workshop. Every non-essential component had been repurposed, sleeping quarters dismantled for materials, scientific equipment reconfigured, even the food synthesizer broken down for crucial parts. In the center of what had been the mess hall, Engineer Sato knelt beside a complex array of components, dark circles under his eyes, as he made minute adjustments to a power coupling. The ship operated on minimal life support to conserve energy, leaving the air cold and thin. "How's it coming?" Captain Rodriguez asked, entering with 2 steaming cups. She'd rationed the last of their coffee for this critical phase. Sato accepted the cup gratefully, his hands trembling slightly from exhaustion. "The good news is, I've managed to isolate the temporal distortion field to a small containment area." He pointed to a makeshift device constructed from their quantum measurement tools. "The bad news is, directing a clear signal through it is proving challenging." Across the room, Dr. Lang sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by data tablets displaying alien language patterns. Officer Patel worked beside her, correlating biological data with communication frequencies. "We've had a breakthrough," Liang called out, waving Rodriguez over. "Their language isn't just verbal and visual. It contains subsonic frequencies we weren't accounting for." "Think of it like tone in human languages," Patel explained, "but much more complex. The same phrase with different subsonics can mean completely different things." "Can we replicate it?" Rodriguez asked. Liang nodded. "With Sato's modified transmitter and parts from our ultrasound medical equipment, yes." The captain allowed herself a small smile, the first in days. Progress report from the others. In what had once been the shuttle bay, Officers Chen and Park had converted their emergency beacon into a directional amplifier. The ship's hull had been partially disassembled in sections, the metal repurposed to create a massive parabolic dish. "We've increased potential broadcast strength by 300%, Chen reported when Rodriguez checked in. "But we can only maintain it for about 90 seconds before the power couplings burn out." 90 seconds to prevent an interstellar incident, Rodriguez mused. No pressure. Outside their asteroid hiding place, the Confederation pursuit fleet had regrouped after following the false trails to their dissipating ends. Junior Commander Trulkin's vessel maintained position near the sector where they'd lost the human ship's signature. "The human vessel must still be here," he insisted during the fleet's strategy conference. "Their propulsion system was damaged. They couldn't have left the asteroid field without detection." Fleet Commander Jevenar's holographic image flickered with interference from the asteroid field. "Your persistence borders on insubordination, Trulkin. 3 cycles of searching have yielded nothing. Permission to continue searching with my vessel alone," Trulkin requested. His interest wasn't entirely tactical. His background in xenobiology had left him fascinated by the humans' unpredictable behavior patterns. Granted, Jevnar replied with obvious impatience. The remainder of the fleet will establish a perimeter around the asteroid field. One more cycle, Trelkin, then you rejoin the fleet. As the communication ended, Trelkin turned to his small crew. Deploy resonance scanners on non-standard frequencies. If they're hiding, they found a way to mask their primary energy signature. Back in the asteroid, Rodriguez called her exhausted crew together. The communication array was complete, a cobbled-together marvel of human ingenuity that bore little resemblance to its original components. "We get one shot at this," she told them, looking at each face in turn. "The power drain will be detectable. Once we broadcast, they'll find us." "Will it work?" Chen asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Engineer Seto rubbed his bloodshot eyes. "Theoretically, the temporal distortion is contained, the translation matrix incorporates the subsonic elements, and the amplifier should give us the range we need." "And if it doesn't?" Park asked quietly. Rodriguez squared her shoulders. "Then we make sure our final message is one worth receiving. Dr. Lang, begin the broadcast sequence. Let's show them what humanity really stands for." Outside, Trelkin's vessel drifted through the debris field, its sensors sweeping on unusual frequency bands. A junior officer suddenly straightened at her console. "Commander, energy spike detected, bearing 147. Junior Commander Trelkin's vessel approached the asteroid cautiously, sensors probing the unusual energy signature. His tactical officer recommended immediate notification of the fleet, but Trelkin raised a hand in restraint. "Not yet," he ordered, his scientific curiosity overriding standard protocol. "There's something different about this energy pattern. It's structured, intentional." Inside the asteroid, the Intrepid's cobbled-together communication array hummed with power, drawing heavily from their remaining reserves. The temperature aboard the ship plummeted as life support systems automatically diverted energy to the broadcast. "Transmission commencing," Dr. Lane announced, her breath visible in the cold air. "First sequence, mathematical constants and universal physical laws." Engineer Seto monitored power levels with growing concern. "We're burning through our reserves faster than calculated. The temporal containment field is consuming more energy than expected. Can we complete the broadcast?" Rodriguez asked, pulling her jacket tighter against the cold. "If we bypass secondary life support," Seto replied grimly. The implication was clear. They'd have heat or oxygen, but not both. Rodriguez nodded without hesitation. "Do it. Oxygen first. We'll manage the cold." As the transmission continued, the crew huddled together for warmth. Dr. Liang's voice was strained but determined as she guided the broadcast through its carefully designed sequence. Second phase, atomic structures and basic chemistry. Third phase, simplified biology and DNA sequences. Fourth phase, communication protocols and language samples. Aboard his vessel, Trelkin watched in fascination as his science officer decoded the incoming transmission. "It's not a weapon signature," the officer reported with surprise. "It's a communication attempt, highly structured and sequentially organized." "Can you interpret it?" Trelkin asked. "Partially. The initial sequences are universal constants, mathematical and physical laws that match our own understanding. They're establishing a foundation for communication." Trelkin's secondary eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign of intense thought among his species. "And the fleet believes these humans are primitive warriors. This transmission demonstrates sophisticated scientific knowledge and communication theory." Making a decision that could end his career, Trelkin ordered, "Respond on the same frequency. Use their mathematical sequence as confirmation, then add our standard first contact protocols." His communications officer hesitated. "Sir, regulations require fleet authorization before." "I take full responsibility," Trelkin interrupted. "This is not the behavior of a hostile species. Transmit now before they exhaust their power source." Back on the Intrepid, Alarms blared as life support systems reached critical levels. The temperature had fallen dangerously, ice crystals forming on interior surfaces. The crew, now wearing emergency thermal gear, struggled to maintain consciousness in the thinning atmosphere. "Final phase complete," Dr. Lang announced, her voice weak. No response detected. Captain Rodriguez fought against the overwhelming urge to close her eyes. "Recycle the sequence. Keep broadcasting until—" "Captain," Officer Chen called out suddenly, his frost-covered console blinking with new data. "Incoming transmission on our frequency." The bridge fell silent as Dr. Liang activated the translation matrix. Mathematical sequences appeared on the main display, perfect mirrors of their own transmission, followed by new symbols. "They're responding," Liang whispered, then louder with growing excitement. "They're responding." Engineer Sato shook his head in disbelief. "Power levels critical. We have maybe 5 minutes before complete system failure." Rodriguez pulled herself to her station. "Divert all remaining power to communication and minimum life support. We need to make these 5 minutes count." On his vessel, Trelkin received the humans' continued transmission. Their power signature was weakening rapidly. They were clearly sacrificing their own life support to maintain communication. "Sir," his tactical officer reported urgently, "the fleet is responding to our position. 3 vessels inbound, weapons primed." Trelkin made the most significant decision of his career. "Move our vessel between the asteroid and the approaching fleet. Continue communication with the humans." His first officer's mandibles clicked in shock. "Sir, that could be interpreted as treason." Trelkin's 4 eyes focused on the asteroid where the weakening human transmission originated. "No, that would be allowing fear to prevent a historic moment of understanding. Keep the channel open." Inside the Intrepid, Dr. Liang worked frantically with the alien response. "It's working," she exclaimed through chattering teeth. "They're sending language patterns. Basic concepts first, then more complex ideas. Can you establish real-time communication?" Rodriguez asked. "I think so, but—" Liang hesitated, looking at the power readings. "We won't last long enough for a complete exchange." Captain Rodriguez surveyed her freezing, oxygen-deprived crew, determination in her eyes despite their dire situation. "Then let's make sure our first words count." The Confederation Science Council chamber erupted in chaos as the transmission from Junior Commander Trelkin played on the central display. Chief Scientist Vesmar repeatedly called for order, her amplified voice barely cutting through the agitated clicking and buzzing of the assembled delegates. "The evidence is incontrovertible," she finally stated when the noise subsided. "The human vessel's communication demonstrates scientific understanding on par with our own, despite their technological limitations." Admiral Xorlak stood rigid, his polished armor reflecting the chamber's lights. "One transmission does not negate the threat assessment. This could be a deception." Trelkin's holographic image flickered as it responded, the transmission degraded by interference from the asteroid field. "Respectfully, Admiral, I have established sustained communication with the human vessel. They are not a military craft, but an exploration ship that accidentally entered our space while testing an experimental drive system. An experimental drive that demonstrates principles unknown to Confederation science," Vesmar added, bringing up complex equations on a secondary display. "Their approach to faster-than-light travel differs fundamentally from our own. They've developed a theoretical framework we never considered." In the council chamber, the eldest member of the Science Directorate, Thosran, rose shakily from his seat. Though physically diminished by age, his voice carried the weight of 3 centuries of respect. "In my lifetime, the Confederation has encountered 17 spacefaring species," he stated. "In each case, we measured them by their adherence to our technological path. Yet here we find humans, technologically behind us in most respects, who have taken an entirely different approach to solving the same problems." Aboard the Intrepid, the situation had grown dire. Emergency power provided minimal life support, but the temperature continued to drop as they maintained the communication link with Trelkin's vessel. The crew huddled together on the bridge, sharing body heat, while Dr. Liang and Captain Rodriguez continued the delicate work of building a translation framework. "They're patching our communication through to their leadership council," Liang reported, her voice weak from the cold and thinning oxygen. "Trelkan is advocating for us." Engineer Seto checked his readings with frost-numbed fingers. "Whatever happens, it needs to happen fast. We have maybe 20 minutes of emergency power remaining." On the main screen, complex data scrolled as the alien translation matrix processed their exchanges. Rodriguez studied the patterns, trying to interpret the emerging conceptual frameworks despite her oxygen-deprived brain struggling to focus. "They're asking about our drive system," she realized, pointing to a repeating symbol sequence. Officer Chen shook his head in disbelief. "We're freezing to death, and they want to talk about propulsion theory." "No," Rodriguez said, sudden understanding dawning. "They're not just curious. They're amazed. Our approach to FTL travel is new to them." Dr. Liang looked up from her console, eyes widening. "You're right. The linguistic markers indicate surprise, even excitement." Back in the council chamber, Chief Scientist Vesmar had shifted from explanation to undisguised enthusiasm as she outlined the implications of the human drive system. Their temporal distortion approach could revolutionize our understanding of subspace mechanics, and that's not all. Their method of containing the distortion field, while crude, demonstrates problem-solving that none of our species would have attempted. Admiral Xorlak remained skeptical. "You appear to have forgotten that these humans evaded our pursuit fleet and resisted capture." "Did they?" countered Thazran gently. "Or did they merely seek to communicate without being destroyed? Consider what they accomplished with damaged systems and limited resources, evaded our sensors, adapted their equipment for new purposes, developed a translation matrix for our language in mere days." On a secure display visible only to the Science Council members, the biological data from the human ship appeared. Dropping temperatures, declining oxygen levels. Vesmar addressed Trelkan's projection directly. "Commander, the human vessel is experiencing critical life support failure. How long can they maintain communication?" Trelkan's response was immediate and urgent. "Minutes at most. They've sacrificed their survival systems to maintain this connection." Thazran turned to face the full council. "In all our history, has any species demonstrated such determination to communicate rather than fight? They face death, yet continue to transmit scientific knowledge." He paused, letting the implication settle. "The question before us is not whether humans are a threat, but whether we will let them die while we debate." In the ensuing silence, a vote was called. The decision was swift and nearly unanimous. Admiral Xorlak received the Council's order with visible restraint. The Confederation pursuit fleet will render assistance to the human vessel. Aboard the Intrepid, the emergency lights flickered as the last reserves of power dwindled. Through increasingly labored breathing, Captain Rodriguez addressed her crew, frost coating her lips as she spoke. "Whatever happens next, we've done everything possible. First contact is established." Officer Park's voice was barely audible. "And if they're coming to finish us off?" Rodriguez managed a small smile. Then humanity's last message to the stars was one of peace and knowledge, not fear. "I can think of worse legacies." The ship's sensors suddenly registered multiple vessels approaching their position at high speed. The bridge of the Intrepid was silent except for the shallow breathing of its crew. Ice crystals had formed on every surface, and the emergency lighting had dimmed to a faint red glow as the last power reserves dwindled. Captain Rodriguez struggled to keep her eyes open, the cold and oxygen deprivation making consciousness a moment-by-moment battle. Through frosted viewports, the flash of approaching ships appeared. 3, then 5, then more, surrounding their asteroid hiding place. Too weak to speak, the crew exchanged glances that conveyed a mixture of fear and acceptance. A sudden vibration ran through the ship, followed by a loud metallic clang that echoed through the hull. The sensation of movement. They were being towed. Docking. Procedure. Engineer Sato managed to whisper, his lips blue from cold. Minutes that felt like hours passed before a hissing sound came from the airlock. The crew was too weak to reach for weapons, even if they'd wanted to. The inner door slid open with a groan of protesting ice, and strange figures entered wearing what appeared to be environmental suits. One approached Captain Rodriguez, towering over her with 4 glowing eyes visible behind a transparent faceplate. The alien raised a device, scanning her vital signs, then turned to its companions. A rapid series of clicks and whistles followed before they began moving with urgent purpose. Portable environmental units were deployed around the bridge, pumping warm, oxygen-rich air into the frozen space. Emergency medical treatment followed, injections of what felt like liquid warmth spreading through Rodriguez's veins, clearing the fog from her mind. As consciousness fully returned, she realized one of the aliens was speaking, in halting but recognizable English. "Captain Rodriguez, I am Junior Commander Trelkin. Your crew will recover. The Confederation Council has recognized your peaceful intentions." 2 weeks later, Captain Rodriguez stood in the observation lounge of the Confederation diplomatic station Harmony Point, watching as engineers made the final modifications to the Intrepid. The ship had been fully repaired, its systems not just restored but enhanced with compatible Confederation technology. "Still finding it hard to believe?" asked Dr. Liang, joining her at the viewport. Rodriguez nodded. "Every day. From first contact disaster to diplomatic triumph in less than a month." High Counselor Orcs approached, his ceremonial robes shimmering with embedded light patterns that Dr. Liang had explained were symbols of rank and achievement. "Your vessel will be ready for departure tomorrow," he announced, his translation device rendering his clicks and whistles into smooth English. "The knowledge exchange has been most productive. More for us than you, I suspect," Rodriguez replied diplomatically. The High Counselor's 4 eyes blinked in what they'd learned was an expression of amusement. "Do not underestimate what the Confederation has gained, Captain. Your species' approach to problems has already inspired several research initiatives." In the station's science bay, Engineer Sato worked alongside Confederation technicians, explaining the theoretical framework behind the experimental drive system. Despite the Confederation's overall technological advantage, the humans' different approach to faster-than-light travel had sparked intense interest. "It's not that your method is more advanced," explained Chief Scientist Vesmar, who had traveled specifically to meet the human crew. "It's that you explored an entirely different path than any of our species considered. This challenges assumptions we've held for centuries." Elsewhere on the station, Officers Chen and Park conducted training exercises with Confederation security personnel, exchanging tactical philosophies and adaptation strategies. The aliens were particularly interested in human improvisation, the ability to repurpose tools and equipment for unintended uses. That evening, the crew gathered for their final meal on the station before departure. Tomorrow they would begin their journey back to Earth, carrying not just revolutionary technology, but humanity's first alliance with an interstellar civilization. "A toast," proposed Captain Rodriguez, raising a glass of Confederation ceremonial beverage that tasted surprisingly like honey tea, "to misunderstandings that lead to understanding." Junior Commander Trelkin, now appointed as Confederation liaison to Earth, raised his own glass, and to the report that began with "Alert. Hostile human ship detected," and ended with the discovery of friends. As their glasses clinked together, the Intrepid floated in the docking bay below, its hull now bearing both Earth and Confederation insignia, the first of many bridges between 2 civilizations that had approached the stars from different paths, but would now explore them together.